Good morning, everyone. Michelle Arnott here at Diamond Rock Glass Studio. Thank you so much for joining me. We will be making some new varieties of succulents for all of those of you who love to make succulents and give them as gifts. Like myself, I love making the succulents. So many of you may remember this jig that I used over 2 years ago. It was my second video that I ever made. And it's right when succulents became, you started seeing them and they were becoming really popular. So I started making some, not using the jig, but they had six leaves. Each ring had 6 leaves and they were really complicated and tricky to put together. So I had my eye on this and I thought that would certainly make it a lot easier. So I started making these 5-sided succulents, and this really does take the trickiness out of getting the angles correct. So as soon as I made this video, they stopped making this Morton assembly tray. So about a year passed and my brother had been printing lithophanes, printing plastic. So I wanted a product that wasn't going to melt. So he got a resin printer and came up with a formula to make a product that does not melt. Even this Morton system, the bottom collapsed as the solder would pool in the center. It caused this to melt. So the beauty of this product is that it does not melt. You can assemble your piece right in the jig, and if solder happens to pool in the center, it will not melt this piece. So here is what many of you are using now. It's the same as this, except for a little bit larger, and it does not melt. So this is on my website. And so this has been I've sold a lot of these, we have, and but I wanted to go back to my initial idea of using having a 6-sided succulent. So each ring would have 6 pieces. So I asked Mark to print one, and so he did. So that's what this looks like. Here's the 6-sided or the hexagon succulent jig versus the pentagon jig. And I also came up with a new pattern. So many of you have seen this pattern. So I'm now going to call this pattern A versus the new pattern. Here's pattern B. So during the last couple of weeks, I have done lots of experimenting with both of the jigs, both of the patterns, combining the rings using both jigs and combining these 2 patterns. So now your options are greatly increased. It's fun to have all these new options and to make a bigger variety of succulents. So I did want to address 2 concerns, the 2 things that I hear the most of. Number 1, I hear when you get to the bigger size pattern pieces, it's kind of tricky to get them to stay in place so you can solder the pieces together. And it's the same with this. Once you get to the bigger pieces, it's a little tricky to keep those pieces in there. So I have done lots of experimenting over the last couple of weeks. So these are some of the different things that I have tried. I've tried these glue dots. I have tried this Fun Tack by Loctite. I have tried sticky putty. I have tried Gorilla mounting putty. I've tried these blue sticks. I have tried these Tacti or Tacti. I don't know how to say that. And I have tried museum wax. So I have tried all these products, and I'm going to show you once we get into assembling today which one of these works really, really well. The other concern that I hear the most of is how much solder these use to put together. So I have come up with a solution to that, which is to use a filler to fill in that center. So it uses much less solder. So we're going to get into all of that. So before we get into the glass that I picked out for today's succulent, I want to show you the difference between the pentagon and the hexagon. So the hexagon is the 6-sided one that's on the left. It's larger. And the pentagon is on the right. It's got 5 sides. So the 6-sided succulent is going to be a little bigger, a little fuller. Well, bigger if you attach more rings together. So I'm going to move down to the first set to compare a 6-ringed hexagon with a 6-ringed Pentagon. So let's take a look at these. So the one on the left is using the hexagon. You can see it's a little bigger and it's fuller. So the one on the right, still beautiful. It's just less leaves. They both have 6 rings. And notice also that I have used pattern B, which is the new pattern for the first 5 rings. And then I used pattern A for number 5 on the pattern A for the bottom. So, and this is what we're going to be making today. I've chosen different glass, but I want to use the hexagon with both patterns, and I'm going to show you how those 2 patterns fit together really nicely. So this one is the pentagon. The first 5 rings are using pattern B, and the bottom ring is using pattern A number 5. And here we have 2 5-ring succulents using the first 4 pattern pieces. So here's the hexagon with the 5 rings and the pentagon. So you can see the hexagon is just a little fuller, a little bigger. And here are the 2 patterns again. Here's pattern A. This is the one that I've been using for the last couple of years. And pattern B has a different shape. It's narrower on the bottom. See how it's narrower on the bottom, and then it has a point at the top. So, and you will see if you make both of these using both patterns, using both jigs, that they both give a different effect and they're different to work with. So now I want to show you just using the pattern A. Here is the hexagon succulent using 5 rings, and here is the pentagon succulent using 5 rings. So here they are side by side. Again, the hexagon, which is the one on the left with 6 sides, is a little fuller and a little larger. And then down, here's again pattern A, hexagon, and the pentagon, and this is using 4 rings. So you can see here's the 4 rings, 5 rings, a hexagon on the left, pentagon on the right. And then here they are just all together, and it's just so nice, the nice variety, different sizes, different shapes. Some are fuller, some are a little less full. So many options that you can make, and this is just a few. And last but not least, I did some succulents with clear iridescent, so they're a little bit harder to see, but this is the 3-ring hexagon on the left, pentagon on the right. So again, you can see the hexagon's a little fuller, a little bigger than the pentagon. And then down here, this is pattern A, so the old pattern, I'm going to call it, versus the pattern B. So here's the hexagon with pattern B. And again, I added a 4th ring on the bottom using pattern A. And again, that's what we're going to be doing today, but we're going to make more rings to it. So this is a comparison of the hexagon and the pentagon. So lots of options and choices. Just makes making succulents a little more fun and interesting. I'm ready to start working on my succulent. I was going to use my other pattern pieces, but I used them so many times I decided I am going to start over, and so I printed these off on cardstock. And by the way, if you order these through my website, you will get this printed on cardstock. And I'm going to go ahead and put an A on all of these. These are all my A's. I mean, you can tell once they're cut apart, but just to make it a little easier, I'm just going to put A and B on all these. Then I'm going to cut them all apart. And again, what we're going to be doing today is we are going to be using the hexagon jig. So we need 6 of these, 6 of these, and 6 of each of these. And then I decided to use some fun glass. This is some that I've recently gotten. It's from Oceanside. It is black and white and clear Baroque. And I'm going to make the accent color. This is also Oceanside. It's a really bright reddish orange. And so this again, I'm just going to cut out 6 of the 5A. So let's get started with that. I need to cut out my pattern pieces first, and then I'm going to start tracing and cutting. So I've done all the grinding and all of the foiling of all the pieces. So again, this is the largest succulent that I make, and I'm only making this one today just to show you any of the concerns that you have. For example, with a really large succulents, we have the challenge of so much solder being used. So I'm going to show you how these large succulents can be made with less solder, and also how these large pieces can fit into the jig. So I'm going to show you all of that. But I figured today, since in my first video I showed you how to make the 3 smallest pattern pieces, I'm just going to show you the biggest one that I make. And so any concerns that you might have, hopefully will all be taught in this video. I'm going to go ahead and flux all of these and then tin all of these. So in my first video, I used this Noka Road paste flux, and remember, I just put gloves on, I dipped my fingers in it, and then I rubbed it all over the foil. With these, there's another kind of flux that I do use. It's this Classic 100 gel flux. This has always been on my website. I do like this flux also. I use more of this. I feel as if it bubbles and smokes less with this, but this still works really well, and it's not a liquid, it's a gel, and it doesn't bubble up and smoke as much, it seems, as the liquid does. So we're going to use this today, and the reason for that is we are going to be using an adhesive for the larger pieces to put them into the jig so they'll stay, and this is a little easier to wipe away. So I just poured a little bit into this little cup here, and so I'm going to paint that onto all of the foil on all of these pieces, and I'm going to tin all of these pieces. Remember all of these that I showed you that I have experimented with? Well, after much experimenting, there's one of these products that I'm about to show you that worked amazingly well, that I was super, super happy with. And it's this product right here, museum wax. So what I have in front of me is 13 ounces of museum wax. And this would take you, even if you make a lot of succulents, probably a lifetime to use this. So I am going to sell this with the Hexagon jig on my Hexagon succulent kit, but it's going to come with a smaller portion of museum wax. And this is actually reusable. And when I saw that it said, oh, that it's reusable, I thought, well, I'm not going to reuse that, but I'll show you. It actually is really easy to reuse this. So I'm about to show you how to use this next. So now I have just finishing fluxing and then tinning all of my pieces. So I'm going to start with the largest piece and show you how we can easily fit this into our jig. So like I said, I use the gel flux because now I want to wipe the back of these pieces a little bit, and with the gel flux it wipes off a little bit easier than the paste flux, and these don't need to be totally clean for the museum wax to stick to it, and I'm going to show you that right now. So this is what you'll get in the kit, just an ounce, and this will last you maybe forever if you keep reusing it. Well, the one thing with this water glass, it's sometimes kind of tricky to see what the front is, so I'm going to feel each piece for the front, so I can quickly grab them and put them in place. So this is the trickiest pattern piece and pattern shape to fit into a jig because, well, this hexagon is a little narrower. Each cavity is a little narrower, so you can see it goes down about that far, versus in the pentagon it goes down a little further. So these are up a little bit more. So let's go ahead and start placing these in here, and you can see I just grabbed not a whole lot of museum wax. I'm going to put it on the back of this glass piece, just gob it on a little, and there we go. It's going to stick right in place for us. So I'm going to go all the way around, and it doesn't matter if where you put it, it doesn't have to be exactly where you're going to keep it. You can move them around a little bit once you get them all stuck on there. So that's what I'm going to do first, is stick each piece on there, and you can see that I did not wipe these pieces really clean. I just wiped them a little bit so it didn't have a lot of flux on it. So, and you can also see how easily these are pressing into place, and once I'm done placing them all, I can arrange them in a way that they're meeting up how the best way possible. Okay, so they're all stuck on. Now I just want to move them around a little bit so that center is even, and so there's even space between all of them. And I'm thinking that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to grab my solder, and we're going to solder these pieces together. And I do this kind of slowly. I start up a little higher and then just carefully drag it down. And it's not unusual for some of the solder to drip down into the center, and like I told you before, it doesn't matter. Obviously don't touch it, wait for it to cool, and then you can dump it out or flick it out, get it out of the center, but wait for it to cool first. Okay, so I have the pieces soldered together. So now, if you have watched almost any of my videos, you will know that I love to use these handy wedges because they are so handy. So I'm gonna, you can kind of just rock this and get it out of there. It'll come out. So now you can easily see this wax. Some is on the back of the glass, some is still in the jig. I'm going to leave that alone for right now, but I am going to end up scraping that off of there and putting it right back in here. You really can reuse this. So, but before I do that, while this is still not super stable, I want to make it more stable. So I am going to get my handy wedges out, and I forgot, for these larger pieces, I want to put my handy wedges on top of my jig, because otherwise this would hang over the edge of it. So I've got this sitting on here in a way that this is totally flat, and I don't think this is totally necessary, but I'm going to go ahead and just put a little bit of flux in all of these spots where I'm going to get the back together a little bit better. And then I'm going to just solder this and give it more strength and stability on the back side here of all these seams. So that's all the back side. Now I'm going to look at the front side again and get this out of the way, and I will put a little flux in all these spots and get the front a little bit better as well. Okay, so the bottom ring is done. At this point you can go ahead and scrape this wax out of the jig and scrape the wax off of your glass. So we're going to be using this wax again for the next at least 2 leaf sizes. And the rest of this will just wash off. So the next thing I like to do with these larger ones, especially the one on the bottom, is I am just going to run some flux on the very outside, and I'm going to add a little bit of solder just to where the seams are. I'm not filling it in by any means. I'm just adding a little bit of strength on the bottom where the seams are. You can just melt some solder. I hope you can see what I'm doing. This really does add some strength. We're not filling it in, we're just giving it a little extra on those bottom seams. And if your ring right now happens to be a little not flat and you want it more level, you can kind of hold it as you're putting the solder in it and wait for that solder to dry or to harden and or to cool, I should say, and it will level your ring. So this is pretty strong now, and that is ready to be washed. But before I wash all of my rings at the very end, I'm going to make all my rings first. So I'm going to do the same thing to these next 2 large sizes, and then these 3, and possibly even this one also. I will not need the museum wax, but I think for this next one I will. But also notice that actually I might not need the museum wax for this one either, because this is the different pattern shape. So it has a narrower bottom, so you can see there it's a little tricky, but actually I do not even need the museum wax for this. So the pattern B that has the narrow bottom, it fits down further, so you don't really need that. But the museum wax is nice to have, for example, for that first one that I did, and then for the pentagon with the bigger pieces. So you can, like I said, with the hexagon kit, the museum wax will come with it. And I'm also going to have a kit where I'm going to have the hexagon and the pentagon, and it will have the museum wax, and it will have both patterns. But if you already have the pentagon, you will have the pattern A, so maybe you just need the hexagon. It will come with the pattern B, and it will also come with the museum wax. So see, that was pretty easy to put that together with no museum wax. So but at least you see how to do that for that other pattern shape, and see how that fell in there. I don't even need to worry about it. I'm just going to let it cool, and I'll get it later. And this is giving a really nice seam far up, so you can see this is going to be very stable. So now I have all 6 rings. Now I'm going to bring them all over to the sink and wash them with flux remover. All of the rings are washed. I used flux remover to remove the flux. And so now we are ready for the final assembly, and I am really excited to show you this part. So there are different ways to fill in the center of the succulent. So I'm going to mention just a couple of ways, and you can experiment with this on your own. I have used these small pebbles. This happens to be Spectrum, which Oceanside now manufactures these, but any glass bead, these are pretty small. You can copper foil these and actually use them as a filler, especially if you've got these large rings that you're putting together. It can accommodate some large pebbles like that. You can also coil up pre-tinned or tinned copper wire, or use copper wire and tin it. I actually will take some wire, and you can really use any gauge, but I'll wrap it around a pencil like this, and then use it as a filler. But what I'm going to show you today is my most favorite way of doing this, and it's recently thought of. I was actually having a conversation with my husband, and he said that they use washers as filler for welding sometimes. So that got me thinking to take a trip to the hardware store. So you're never going to guess what I found and what works amazingly well. So I'm just going to show you some of my treasures here. So did you know, or do you know, what galvanized steel is? So galvanized steel is steel that has been dipped in zinc to prevent it from rusting. So zinc is a very good thing that solder will adhere to. So, you know, like the zinc framing. So this can actually be used as a filler. This right here, I just barely soldered this together, but this is this washer and a little screw like this. And did you know they also make zinc screws and zinc bolts and zinc washers. So that's what's over on this side. So I just gathered a few. So what we're going to use today is a zinc washer and a zinc bolt. So you can go to the hardware store and collect all of these, you know, nuts and bolts, and make sure they're made of zinc, or they are galvanized steel, which is steel that is dipped in zinc that the solder will adhere to. So this particular combination, this is zinc, I have found works great for this particular succulent. So to make this work, I am going to flux this zinc nut this zinc bolt and this zinc washer. And first, I'm going to solder these two together. I am going to put a thicker glove on for this because this does conduct heat so well. So I'm going to put a thicker glove, at least on my left hand that I'm holding this with. So you can solder this bolt right to the washer. Okay, so I've got this soldered to the washer. And now I'm going to put this bottom ring over it. And I am then going to put this next ring over it. I'm not attaching this to my bottom ring. I will do that after I attach this ring. So now this ring is sitting over it, and I'm going to flux the bottom of this succulent glass piece, and this bolt should be fluxed really well also. So we're going to want to make sure everything is centered really well. So once you are centered, everything is centered, you can go ahead and solder this second ring to the bolt, and the washer is beneath the bolt. So any solder that drips or falls is going to go onto that washer. So I'm starting at the seam and going in toward that bolt. Well, like I said, the bottom piece is not connected yet. I'm just connecting this second ring. So I just want to make sure that it is raised up. I want to make sure that the second ring, this black and white one, is raised up enough. So now, definitely with a glove on, you want to lift this up or wait for it to cool. But so now you want to offset the bottom and center it. We're going to attach at all the seams. And then I'm going to just keep adding my layers and rings, offsetting each. Okay, there is our 6-ring succulent. Thank you again so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I know you're going to love making these succulents with so many different varieties now with these 2 jigs and the 2 patterns. And the museum wax makes it really easy, as you can see, to fit those bigger pieces in there so it's not so tricky, and less solder, because the cost of solder has gone like double in the last 2 years. So that is a concern. The cost of solder has really gone up. So I did just want to recap some of the different 3D items that I do have available on my website. So the last video, I made this 3D cross. So I want to show you again what that looks like. These are super fun to make and super easy with the 3D cross jig. So my brother Mark also prints this jig, which makes a 3D star. So that looks like this. So I have YouTube video. It's also on my website on how to make all of these. I have the jig to make, this makes the Christmas trees behind me. So that is very easy, very quick. All of these make great Christmas gifts. So I've started now making Christmas things for Christmas. I love Christmas, and I always put a big display in my windows. So I'm working on Christmas stuff right now. This jig, you may have seen this before, that makes the spinners. So I have a tutorial on how to make a spinner using that jig. And this is one of the 5 patterns that I have. And I feel like I'm forgetting something, but if I am, I'm sure I'll talk about it in the next video. So we have lots of ideas. So we're coming up with lots of 3D items. So lots of ideas to share with you. And again, if you are new to stained glass or you need a refresher, please feel free to go back to my very first video. It's 55 minutes long. It's how to make a sun catcher, and it goes over every step of the stained glass process. So from picking out your pattern to picking out your glass, to how to cut, grind, foil, solder, and finally finish your piece. It's all taught in that first video. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.